Got those pre-start jitters right now. Let's see what happens. Why am I getting smoking from the alternator area? Is this like the 5th snowstorm this week? Look at this drift. Oh, need snow pants to get to the garage. Cam swap in my 01 WS6 is finally coming back together. In the last video, we not only finished breaking this thing down, but also started putting it back together. The new cam is in. We completely repainted and refinished our intake manifold, custom smooth valve covers, along with lots and lots of cleaning and prep and all that stuff, you know, that is just part of the process, but that is time consuming. But heads are on, torqued, we're going back together. But there's still a ton of work to do, so we're gonna get right at it this morning, this snowy morning. Starting over here on the bench, I've got some parts that came in the last day or so, except with the exception of these push rods I've had. I've got new intake manifold gaskets, just good to do while the intake is right there. I just placed it on there for the last video. I think these are like sound deadening things. I've got push rods here, and most cam swaps like this, where I didn't mill the heads and I use a stock style replacement lifter, 7.4 inch push rods are probably going to be correct, but it's always good to measure and make sure that your preload is correct for your lifter application. So I'd like to do that and make sure that we have the right push rods, because if we need to order some, I want to get them on order so that we're not waiting on push rods to start this thing. Before I can get the rockers on, we got some upgrades to do. If you guys are at all familiar with the LS platform, you've probably heard of the trunnion upgrade, and that's because these trunnions from the factory, if we zoom in, whoa, enhance. Enhance.
Enhance. Enhance. Enhance.
There we go. See those little circles there? Those are needle bearings. There's like hundreds of needle bearings in these rockers. And they're pretty reliable, but when they do fail, and they can fail, is they will just shed all of those needle bearings and they just all end up in your oil pan. They're going all throughout your motor. So a very common upgrade is the trunnion upgrade, and that is, there's a couple different versions available. I like CHE, and I think this one that I ordered, I don't even remember, I think this is Smith Brothers. Anyway, what I like about these ones is they use a bushing style. So these use a bronze bushing that is now going to run and rotate on these little oil channels in there. So smooth operation, and there's no needle bearings to fail. So basically you have to take all 16 rocker arms, press out the trunnion that's in there, and then press these in, you know, with oil, fresh new motor oil, and then put a locking ring on each side, and then you're back together. I've done this on the C6 Z06 motor build. I've done it on the 69 Camaro motor builds. Again, all LSs follow kind of the same path, at least in my garage. These are the good reliability upgrades that you probably should be doing. But once we have that done, we can get our push rod in, or measure for push rod length with my adjustable push rod length checker. Got the harmonic balancer here. I'd like to put this back on, but you know, we got to give it a quick coat of flat black or something. Also, there's a new AC belt on the car, and it looks like whoever replaced it forgot to get out all the old one. So I'm gonna have to pick through that with like a screwdriver or a pick or something, get all that old stuff out. Got a new GM torque to yield bolt on here, so we can torque that to God knows whatever that ridiculous torque spec is. Got a couple of ground straps I can connect on the back of the head. We'll pull the intake manifold and valve covers back off that were just there for motivation. So let's keep going. All right, just to show you guys what one of these looks like. You can see all those needle bearings in there. And when they come apart, that's what ends up in your motor. You don't really need any special tools to do this. You just Find a socket that you can press out one side. It's like this one's a 20 millimeter. Just cleared the driveway using that Aaron's snowblower that I got when I bought this car. She rips. And then another socket on this side to do the pressing. Put it in your vise. I think you could use probably a hammer too if you don't have a vise. But also, why don't you have a vise? Oh! Pop. Exactly how I drew it up for that to happen. But yeah, just like that, the whole thing pops apart and explodes across your garage. And now you've got a bare rocker there that is ready to accept some nice instructions with this thing. Basically, you press in the bronze thing there on one side, put the trunnion in, press in the bronze one on the other, put in your lock rings, boom, done. I'll show you guys them when we're all done. So now I just have to do that 15 more times and reassemble and find all those parts that just went all over the garage. Let's do it. That's not going anywhere. All right, so got the trunnions installed on the factory LS1 rockers. Really nice kit, everything went together super smooth, just as with just about anything on an engine. Make sure your stuff is clean and use clean motor oil when putting them together. You don't really need any special tools. Like I said, I just used my vise and some spare washers and sockets and stuff I had around. So that's done, the rockers are all done and put together. No more needle bearings to fail and fall into the motor. Got my brand new ATI balancer installed. Okay, so maybe it's just the stock one with a coat of rattle can Rust-Oleum, but it looks a lot better with a new GM bolt. That's another torque to yield fastener. I believe the spec was 30 foot-pounds and then 130 or something degrees, which basically translates to yank on it as hard as you can and it'll probably be fine. Sometimes you can install it with the old bolt, you know, run it in with the impact. I bought this, I'll leave a link for this in the description. I bought this harmonic balancer installer kit. It basically has a bunch of different sizes and this like bearing thing. Makes installing harmonic balancers an absolute breeze, well worth the investment. So that was easy to install, then install the new bolt. So that's done. Right now I'm double checking pushrod length and I think that I'm glad that I did. So why don't you guys come in here and I'll show you how you do this real quick. So we need to make sure we have the correct length lifters for this application. These are using hydraulic lifters, which means that the lifter is basically on a plunger of oil, which means there's a travel within the lifter. And you need to make sure you get your preload right, which is basically the amount that you preload that plunger to keep the valve train happy, to make sure you're not overextending the lifter, make sure you have a nice, quiet, and smooth running LS engine. So anytime you change head gasket thickness or camshafts or valve springs or really just anything in the valve train, it's probably a good idea to check pushrod length. The stock length is 7.400. So we need to see if that's going to work for us or not, because that is what I have. So the way you do this is you need to make sure the cylinder that you're checking is on the base circle. This one already is, but I'll show you how I do it. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. So right now we can see this is the exhaust valve is opening, and you'll need to put your finger on it to push them back down, because there's no spring pressure there, obviously. So now the exhaust is closing, which means we should start to see the intake opening soon. So the intake valve just opened, actually. We kind of missed that, but now you can see it's closing. See, my thumb is pushing it down. So now the intake valve is closed. Because of that, we know we're on the compression stroke. Obviously you have the exhaust stroke, then the exhaust valve closed, and the intake valve opened, which means we sucked in a bunch of fresh air. Now the intake valve closed, we know the exhaust valve is going to be closed, which means the piston is coming up to top dead center to fire the compression stroke. So all of that means that we know that both of these valves are on, or both of these lifters are on the base circle of the cam, which is where we can take our push rod measurements. So now we can get rid of these two stock push rods. I'm going to put in my comp 7702-1 push rod length checker. This is adjustable from 6.8 inches to I think 7.6 or 7.4 inches or something like that. I don't know. And basically what we want to do is find zero lash. And that is the point where there is no space between the rocker, the tip of the rocker, and the push rod length checker here. So I've already done this, I already know what the answer is, but just to show you guys an example, we'll put this in there. I have it cranked out about 11 turns, I think, and I'll talk about what exactly that means in a second. And fire this rocker down. Doesn't need to be torqued or anything, just needs to be tight. And listen to this. See that? So we have play between the tip of the push rod and the rocker. So now we know that we're too short to be at zero lash. So we'll pull this off. Take our push rod length checker, and I'm going to bring it out just a half a turn. Yeah, just about a half a turn there. Put this back on. And now our slack is taken up and we are basically at zero lash here. So you're going to want to do that at a couple different spots. I mean, maybe not really necessary on an application like this, but it's good practice to do at least both valves on one side. So I did these two right here and these two right there. Some guys say do all four corners of the motor. If you have a really, really tight, like low lash lifter, there's guys that have to run like 16 different length push rods because the lifters are that sensitive, but these are basically LS7 drop-in lifters, so it's not like that. But anyways, the way this push rod length checker works is it's 50 thousandths per complete turn, and there's a little line here that's going to line these two up. So we're going to count how many turns out we are at zero lash. So there's half a turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Then we got to do some math. So we got 11 and a half turns to zero lash. It's 50 thousandths per turn. So we do 11 and a half times 50 thou plus the original length of 6.80 gets us to zero lash is 7.375 inches. But we need to add the preload, which is going to be based on the lifter manufacturer. In this case, I believe it's 60 thou, but I'll have to double check and do a little bit more research for these Morrill what are they, 7, I don't even remember the part number, but the Morrell LS7 drop-in lifters, I think they want 60 thou, which means our desired preload or our desired overall pushrod length is 7.435, which means potentially our current 7.400 pushrods are too short because that would only give us 25 thou of preload. If you don't have enough preload, your lifters could be pretty noisy, you know, a little bit of slack in the valve train there. So you don't want that. And you don't want them too long either, or too much preload, because then you can hang a valve. So you got to find that right balance. There are guys out there that make custom length push rods, but for a hydraulic lifter like that, where there's a lot of travel, you basically just need to find the next best size that's going to work for the amount of preload that you need. I have a feeling they're usually 25 thou increments. I have a feeling we're going to end up going with 7.425 or 7.450. Maybe I'll have to take another measurement on the other side and see where that goes. But I don't think that these Tick Performance 7.40 push rods are going to work. So I'm going to reach out to them, see how quickly they can get me the correct length, and we should be good to go. There's plenty to do in the meantime, so I'm not too worried about it. But I wanted to get this done so that we're hopefully not waiting on them. So that's one thing in your project, that do it as soon as you have the heads on and you know your rockers are ready to go on, so that you can get your push rod length right, so you can get them ordered, so you're not waiting on them to hear that chop. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to wait to hear the chop. We want it now. The meatloaf.
The meatloaf! We want it now!
All right, hopefully you guys learned a little something there. Let's keep going with other stuff. Easy. Just blew out my shoulder in the process, no big deal. Those multi-layer steel gaskets are sharp. Matches the paint though. Oh yeah, more new parts. Always rolling in, got everything lined up on the bench here. But first, we got progress over here as well. Hello, we got some long tubes. Alert the media. The Trans Am has got some long tube Headers. So yeah, the headers are in. Passenger side literally slipped right in, no problem. Left them a little bit loose for now, just in case we need to make some adjustments with the rest of the exhaust, which I've laid out here. I think this is basically how it goes front to back. So spent a little time getting that all set up to hopefully make it easier once we start basically building this system from the headers back to the tips back there. Got my O2 sensor extensions ready to go. Still need to grab my O2 sensors out of the factory manifolds over there and remove the rest of the cap back there, but we'll get there. Anyways, headers are in. The driver's side I had to grind just a tiny bit off the flange, just literally a tiny bit at an angle just to get the clearance between the body to get it, you know, kind of slide it up in there. Oh yeah, and I had to undo the steering knuckle, which I still have to reinstall, but no big deal there. Other than that, once I did that, literally 3 seconds with the grinder, this thing slid right in. Clearance to the stock K member is real close. Oh my God, that's my blood dripping down. All dried up. Any doctors out there, is your blood supposed to be that red? Am I dying? Oh well, here for a good time, not a long time. So I might see if I can finagle that a little bit, or, you know, just see if we can grind a little bit off the factory pinch at the K member there, no big deal. Other than that, fitment seems pretty good, and hopefully we can build it back from there. Also, you guys saw, I got the water pump back on, got the power steering pump assembly back on. That is a pain in the butt, but that's done. Radiator and fans are back in, fans are plugged in, radiator hoses are good to go. Front of the motor is basically all assembled. Got the AC belt on. Basically got to plop the intake manifold on, drive belt, ignition, and put the air intake system on, and this thing's ready to go. But there's still a lot of work to be done between now and then. Also, this little air intake / rad cover, the hardware was all rusted, so did a little bit of prep, hit those with some flat black. Those should now blend in a lot better. Still gonna clean this up a little bit, then we'll get that installed. Over here, it's time to tackle ignition. As I mentioned in the previous video, because of our smooth valve covers, we need to relocate our coils. So once again, Holley came through in the clutch and hooked me up with all of the ignition components I'm gonna need for this car. Those guys own a lot of brands. So if you need anything from ignition to suspension to intake parts to valve train parts to interior parts, those guys got you covered, and they're growing every day. So shout out to Holley for providing, you know, front to back, inside and out parts for all these modern day hot rods. But we've got some MSD coil packs here so that we maximize the spark output going to this LS1. These coils are now 24 years old, so, you know, probably a good item to replace anyways. They do occasionally go bad. And I mean, look at these things. They're beautiful. They came in this awesome little styrofoam case here. Can't beat that either. I already got one of them assembled in my coil relocation bracket here, so you can see how that works. Basically just 3 spacers, slide them in, good to go. Look at the size difference here. So now we can find a compact place to mount this. But if you wanted to put these right onto a stock, you know, car, boom, they bolt right in, no big deal. So there's that. Got my coil extension harness ready to go. And I think all the components I'm gonna need to build my own custom plug wires. These 45s will go right off the coil packs here. 8.5mm superconductor wires. Unfortunately, I ordered these straight spark plug ends because they worked well on the C6, because basically the wires go straight over from the headers into the fender. But I think in this application, the 90-degree spark plug terminals are going to be better. So I got a set of those on order. They should be here in the next day or so. But before we do any of that, I need to find a place to mount these coil packs. And I think where I'm gonna do that, I've decided is, at least on the passenger side, right up here. Look at that dead space on the frame rail that's covered up by this plastic thing right here. I think that I can squeeze this whole assembly right in under there. And not only will these be hidden, but that keeps the plug wire length, you know, pretty reasonable, like maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet max to the back cylinder there. So I'll have to find a way to secure the bracket there. Also, there's some rust here, or basically not even rust, just peeling paint. And it's right below the battery. I assume a battery leaked at one point and just kind of peeled away the paint. So I'll see if I can grind that down, prime it, maybe hit it with some of that extra bright red paint that I have. And you know that it's a good mounting location for electronic components, because on the driver's side, Pontiac / GM already put something here. I don't even know what this is. Like, There's the air pump right there, which actually I think we're deleting. Maybe I can put it right there. But we'll see if I need to mount it kind of more up here. There's kind of a dead space right here. We could probably mount them. That could probably work as well. But yeah, that's the air pump, which we are allegedly getting rid of. So there's a chance I could just mount it in that area too. But yeah, lots of electronic components mounted down here. No problems at all. I mounted the coil packs on my 69 Camaro here, literally right above the headers, like on the floorboards. And a bunch of guys were like, gonna roast those things. Those things will never last. 2 years later, absolutely perfect. I mean, the coil packs are more robust than you guys would think. You can hose down, power wash engine bays. The coil packs are right there. They're pretty robust components, so as long as they're not literally on top of the headers, you're probably fine. So this is a perfect location for them. They'll be protected. They should stay nice and cool. And most importantly, they'll be hidden. And this motor is gonna look sweet. So that's a lot of work ahead of me. I don't know how much we're gonna get done in this next segue, but the only way we're gonna get anything done is if I stop talking. So back to work. Huh? What? Sounds good. just like that, we have got true duals on our 4th gen F body. Starting up here, go into the X pipe. Fitment here is really, really good. Tucks real close to the floor. X pipe then goes into the over axle pipe. Had to get in the interior and grab a seatbelt bolt, or put a seatbelt bolt through the floor to get this hanger set up going. Up over the axle, these 2 pipes bolt together. Got our torque arm relocation bracket and arm on there, looking really good. Mufflers out to tips, boom, done. Of course, everything is just loose right now. I cannot recommend enough when you're building an exhaust system or just putting one together that's pre-made like this, leave everything loose and then get the fitment where you want and kind of go and tighten it. Because if you tighten everything at the headers, then you need more room for wiggle room back here. You're kind of stuck. So leave everything loose, get the fitment where you want, and then we can go and tighten these things up. I'm gonna crank down really hard on these band clamps just because we want this thing to be nice and tight, nice and solid. But overall, for the price of this Speed Engineering kit, seems like fitment is pretty good. And these quad tips, man, those things are gonna look sweet. Of course, I'll get them centered and spaced, and yeah, they look real nice. So exhaust, check. Ooh, I'm dragging a wheel, love that. Also, got the frame rail there, repainted, refinished. Now it looks way too good, but I mean, it's better than rust. More importantly, look at that. Got the coils mounted, used my riv nut setup, put a really clean couple riv nuts in there. That's nice and solid. Over here, I am so proud of myself. You guys saw in the B-roll, I was able to use the factory air pump. Oh God, I guess I didn't bolt it in. How was that? Anyways, yeah, check it out. Was using the factory air pump bracket. The holes were spaced literally perfectly. It's like it was designed to hold these MSD coils. Then I still got to get rid of the air pump lines there, but this thing will pop right back up in here, and then we can run the coil wires, or the spark plug wires rather, through that hole. So most importantly, other than 1 hole or 2 holes for riv nuts, we didn't have to really, drastically cut anything, modify anything. And we could always go back to stock configuration if we wanted to on the spark plug wires. Over here on the bench, I've got a ton of parts that we're gonna start firing onto this car. But check out my sub list. Submarine, drew it myself, pretty nice. Look at the periscope. Details. Of course, we got the main list here, but we have cam and exhaust, which is a huge project in and of itself. When I get to this point, sometimes I like to write stuff down just so I don't forget. Like, for example, there's no oil in the car. Definitely don't want to forget to do that before we start it. Tighten the drain plug. Didn't do that. So I've already knocked a few things off. The headers are nice and tight now. I retightened that steering shaft. The old exhaust is gone. We can now cross that off. Coils are mounted, but all this other stuff we still have to do. And that's up on the bench here. I've got, I think, all of my ignition components now. Spark plug wires, ordered some extra ones of these. Got my 90-degree boots here. Fuel plugs and stock fuel to 6AN fuel fittings. Coolant temp sensor because I broke one. I finally got this throttle plate adapter, again because the one from Holley was back ordered. So this will hold us over for now. I have some coil wires coming. I think they're going to be here tomorrow, hopefully soon, because these things, normally you'd be able to pull these wires off of the bracket here and just use these, but these wires are stiffer than rigor mortis. Like, I tried to get them off the bracket and I think they're just gonna crack and break. They're 24 years old, probably been through thousands and thousands of heat cycles. So probably best to just get new coil wires, which will then plug into the extension harness, which will then plug into the main ECU harness. I already got started on one of my wires here using my MSD spark plug wire maker. I've had this forever, made a lot of sets of wires with this thing. I did remove the factory heat shielding, mainly because I just didn't want to look at it like this. Possibly gonna clean this up and then give it a nice coat of matte black, but you know, it gives more clearance to the exhaust, and in my experience, really not necessary in a setup like this. And a lot of times they just end up rattling and hitting against the exhaust, so we'll see if we end up putting these back on or not. Also got some new coolant crossover gaskets here. And of course, my Tick Performance push rods came in 7.425 inches. These should be perfect, get us the perfect preload on our Mortal lifters. Now, making your own wires is really, really pretty easy. Obviously, you got to start with one end, then go to the car and measure and see how far you need to go from the coil to your spark plug. But MSD has this nifty little tool here. First, we got to strip back some insulation, just kind of idiot proof with this tool. Just run your blade across it, spin this around a few times. Twist it off. Now we've exposed the actual conductor. Take your terminal here, bend this over, put that in there. And I usually like to take some pliers or something. Want a little bit exposed right there. Start the crimp just with some pliers or something just to get it kind of started in the right direction, if that makes sense. And then we're gonna finish it up with this tool right here, right in there. So we're gonna put this side down in the metal part here. Put this other side on. Put it back in the vise. Run it till it bottoms out. Pull it out of the tool. Boom. There's our crimp. Now we can take some dielectric grease or some Dawn dish soap. Put that on there. Grab one of our boots. Slide it on. There we go. Then obviously take this to the car. I like to plug one end into the actual coil, make a measurement with a Sharpie, cut it off, and then do the same thing with either your straight boot on the other side, or in our case, the 90-degree boot. But you can see I already made the first one, so this is what our set is gonna look like. This is for cylinder number 8, so backmost one on the passenger side. Never a bad idea to check to make sure, obviously, you have continuity and also that you have good resistance. MSD specifies 50 ohms approximately per square foot. This is about a 2.5 foot wire. Yeah, so it looks like we've got right on the money, about 104 ohms of resistance on this, between 2 and 2.5 foot wire. So we're good to go. So let's build the rest of these ignition wires, get the intake manifold assembled, start dropping push rods in. There's a lot left to do here, so I'm just gonna quit talking, back to work. The parts pile that has been here for like 3 weeks is now basically just this Melling oil barbell thing that I didn't even end up using. A couple plug wires, little things, all the rest of it is on the car. We've made a bunch of progress. Intake manifold is back on. I showed this in the B-roll. The ground connections and stuff are tight at the back of the head. Flip this injector that was upside down. A lot of you guys caught that. Intake manifold is torqued down. Fuel lines are tight. I made this fuel line back here that runs from that fuel rail up to the factory fuel line right there. Gotta figure out what to do with whatever this is, evap line or something, which clearly broke on the way out. All the new 7.425 tick performance push rods are in. Rockers are torqued to 22 foot-pounds. Brand new springs in there looking... What else? Oh yeah, tightened up all the exhaust, cranked down on those, so the exhaust should be good to go. Might need some final adjustment once I get it outside and can take a look at the tips and see how they're gonna look, but bam! That looks mean. Super nice. Oh yeah, throttle body adapter and throttle body is on, so look at that. We got all the throttle ready to roll. But I'm gonna make a quick change of plans here, I think. Take a look at the list. Basically, we have fluids, ignition wires and extensions. Gotta get the throttle cables on, and then the valve covers. And then, theoretically, we should be able to, first of all, prime the fuel system, check for leaks. If none, then turn the key and see what happens. But I think I'm gonna call a quick audible for today, and let me show you why. Yeah. Spent like 2 hours this morning snow blowing. This is like the snowiest winter I think we've had in like 5, 6, 7 years. Like the snowiest winter since I've lived here. I've had to use the snowblower like twice a week for the past 2 weeks. Thing rips, by the way. But where I'm going with that is the coil harness that I'm waiting for that is going to be compatible with my new coil relocation harness. I don't know if it's going to be here today. It's supposed to, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of cars out on the road. The roads are real sloppy and icy. So what I may do here, just for today, just to see if we can crank this thing over, see if it fires off, is, as much as I hate to do it, put these junky old stock valve covers and coils back on and see if we can get this thing to fire. Oh, I might have thrown away the plug wires. We might not even be able to do that. I might have an extra set from an LS7 in the cabinet there. We'll see. So I guess we'll see. If those harnesses show up, then we can continue with plan A, which is use those new valve covers, which I wet sanded and polished. They look great. Or if I have some spark plug wires, because I threw away the factory ones from this car, then we can try those. But basically all that's left is ignition wires, plug in the injectors, plug in all of our connections, fill this thing with fluids, put the belt on, put the SLP lid on, and then we can crank it up. So yeah, let me see what I got around. If not, we'll keep going on making plug wires. I already made one of them, that number 4, or the number, for what cylinder is that? Number 8, I already made the number 8 spark plug wire, but there's technically 7 more to do, so we'll see. Let's keep going. I got 7 of them. I think we can make this work. We'll just use the other one that I made and loop it around or something. Oh man. You know it's a good project when it looks like a bomb went off in the garage. Got a lot of cleanup to do. But the good news is, I think we're ready to turn the key on this thing. Intake is back on, couplers tightened up, got our IAC and throttle position sensor, intake air temp sensor, mass airflow sensor. Belt is back on, topped off the power steering fluid. Got the coil, the factory coils on there. Did not make the same mistake that I made last time, or that GM made from the factory. Left out all of the coil bolts way in the back there. Refer to video number, I think, 3 for that. You think I'm playing? What the? Sneak attack! And then put on some factory LS7 plug wires. Unfortunately, they're all basically touching the headers. So if we do start this thing, we definitely don't want to start it for very long. And I only had 7. I must have broken one when I took those out. So I got my long plug wire on number 8 back there, just kind of looped around. But all the factory coils hooked up, plugged in to our new NGK TR55 plugs. The only thing that's not plugged in is the injectors, because I think I might crank this thing over a little bit without the injectors plugged in, just to prime the oil system a little bit. 5.5 quarts of Barotella T6 down the hatch here. Put a little bit of coolant in it. I need to run out, get some more Dex Cool. It looks like I'm out of that. Batteries in and off the charger. Coolant lines are all hooked up. I don't see any leaks yet, which is a good sign. I got a whole bunch of stuff just blocked off here. I need to run a coolant hose from down here over to the steam port here, but I don't have the right size, which I think is 1/4 inch, so I'll have to go get some of that when I go get some Dex Cool. But yeah, I think we are basically good to check for leaks, and the first thing I'm going to do is just turn the key once and check for fuel leaks, which I think we can do right now. So you just heard the fuel pump prime. Probably do that a couple times and then see if we have any leaks. Heard it bog down there a little bit. We'll do it one more time. We definitely have pressure now. Do we have any leaks? Don't see or smell any. So that's a good sign. Usually you'll smell it even before you see a leak. But yeah, looks like all my fuel lines are holding up so far. Okay, next, let's guess hop in this thing and crank it over a few times. And first of all, make sure that everything sounds good, that we didn't mess anything up as far as timing or rockers or anything like that. And then if all that sounds good, we'll plug in the injectors, light this thing off. All right, so I actually have HP tuners hooked up here, and engine oil pressure is negative sitting here, so don't love that. So I'm wondering what we might get when we start this thing and or turn it over. But the main thing I'd like to do right now is just make sure that everything sounds good. Injectors are unplugged. Here goes nothing. Sounds good. It almost seems like it has a little bit of a gallop, but I don't know if it did that before. Did we build any oil pressure? All right, so I was just doing some reading online. Apparently these Gen 3 PCMs don't have oil pressure going to the PCM. So that oil pressure sender just goes right to the gauge. So that would explain why we have a weird reading on HP tuners. I just plugged in all the injectors because I don't see any leaks, and it sounded pretty good when we were turning it over. So yeah, I think at this point we're ready to fire this thing. It is an actual hailstorm outside right now, so don't want to open the garage door, but that's fine. I don't want to let this thing run for very long at all. First of all, the plug wires, as I said, are touching the headers, and we still need to top off the coolant. So really all I want to do right now is make sure that this thing starts, it runs somewhat, and that we have oil pressure. It's obviously not tuned for the cam or this massive throttle body, so it may run a little bit poorly. We'll see. But it should be able to start and hopefully idle. But yeah, let's hop in there, twist the key, and see what happens. All right, here goes nothing. Got those pre-start jitters right now. Let's see what happens. Come on. There's oil pressure, lots of it. She needed a little bit of throttle. I gotta stay in the throttle, but she's running! Woo! Oh man. All right, let's check for leaks. Oh, she sounds healthy. Woo! What's going on up here? We burning plug wires yet? Maybe, probably. Shoo! Any leaks? Nope. Woo! She is alive! Well, kind of. You need throttle. I think that's pretty typical for an untuned Gen 3, LS1 with a pretty big cam in it. We might need to make a couple airflow and idle adjustments in HP tuners before this thing will idle on its own. But with a little bit of throttle, she fires right up and sounds pretty darn good. Why am I getting smoking from the alternator area? What is up with that? Don't see anything. Maybe it just has some oil on it. Did spill all kinds of fluids on the alternator during this whole process. Sweet. Tons of oil. I saw like, what was that? 70 pounds of oil pressure at start up there and built it rather quickly. So I think we're good there. Should we do it one more time from the back just to hear how it sounds? Check this out, guys. I just pulled the injector fuses again just to check this thing cranking. Watch the oil pressure just on cranking. Oh yeah. See how smooth it is now too, cranking over? I think that sometimes with a motor, what you got new lifters and stuff is the lifters aren't quite pumped up. So maybe the valves weren't quite opening all the way, but once it builds oil pressure like it did when it started, then obviously the valve train works properly, and now we've got nice even compression, and this thing should be running smooth once we make some tuning adjustments. Oh, she is alive. Wow, I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but that was a ton of work. It looks like someone came in here and ransacked the place. These chassis, not that much fun to do heads and cam on. If I'm going to do it again, everything's coming out the bottom. Heads need to come off. Dropping it out the bottom. Cam swap, out the bottom. Oil change, pull the motor. Interior detail, sell it. All things considered though, guys, it was kind of a pain, but I'm glad that it's done. The car runs, it has great oil pressure, it sounds insane. Speed Engineering exhaust sounds great. It's not obnoxiously loud at idle, but you can tell it's gonna have a great chop and a great tone to it, and hopefully not drone. But that is gonna do it for this video. I've got to clean up before I do anything else. There's still a lot here to do before we can call this thing completely done as far as the cam swap is concerned. Got to finish our plug wires and route those so they don't burn on the headers. We definitely need to make some adjustments in HP tuners just to get this thing to idle and run. Maybe some adjustments on the throttle here. We need to finish our cooling system, like hoses and stuff. Fill it the rest of the way with coolant. Get our beautiful smooth valve covers on there. A couple other little things. And hopefully get this thing up to temperature. And I would say out on the road, but it's about 3 feet of snow out there right now. So we'll see, but plenty of work left to do. And I'm gonna get started right now. But if you guys enjoyed this video and are enjoying the series, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I will see you in the next one.